All right, Coach Bianco, thanks for joining us today on this SimpleCoach Coach interview. Really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to take a look at how Big Red has done, um, this past season, and how some of your impressions.
Yeah, it was a busy 2022 season. Certainly more than a normal year. We took the team abroad in August to Lisbon, Portugal, which was an incredible trip, and we were also able to celebrate the 70th year of Denison soccer in the fall and bring some people back to campus, and so there was just a ton going on. Um, Glass half full side of me can point to measurables like the amount of wins and different things, goals scored, goals conceded, top three finishes in the league, back-to-back conference tournaments. And so over kind of like the 2 year window for this team and this program, there was a ton to point to that we were really proud of. Um, but we can also point to, I think, objectively being in our biggest moments this year, we just weren't as good as we would have liked to have been. And certainly that's where the area of focus is going to be for the program moving forward. But if you get stuck in that side of it, then I think you miss also some really good things that have been happening with a team that, quite frankly, it's still a young team and a young
Mm-hmm.
program. I think 2/3 of the group are freshmen or sophomores, so a lot to be excited about. But
Mm-hmm.
certainly we're ambitious and we were disappointed about maybe not going as far as we would have liked to have gone.
Um, I'll ask the one question first, but I do want to come back to those where you said the biggest moments. I'd like to get you know some more thoughts on that. But like, what was there anything in particular like that stands out as a highlight to you? Again, considering and just for everyone watching, right? This is your second full season at
Right.
Denison, and so you're I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but you're just getting started along this process of how building this program out to what you envision it to be, and it's relatively early in that process.
Yeah. I mean, we do a really thorough end of the year 360 review with each player, and one of the things that we review is with each guy is kind of like what stands out for you as a high point moment as from a personal and a team perspective. And so it's been really interesting to see what their thoughts are on it. And there was a couple moments that really stood out. A game like Wilmington in particular, we go down to their place, a really good team, played down a man, scored the game winner down a man on the road in the 88th minute or whatever it was, and then had to kind of see out some chaoticness, craziness at the end. And it's just one of those games that's really galvanizing for a group, and the
Yeah.
guys loved it. I mean, so there's specific moments like that. There was our abroad trip were really big moments for the program to grow. Our ability to go to Boston and pick up a win and a tie to start the year. I mean, just some really awesome things that when you strip the emotion of disappointment away from a year,
Hmm.
you're also able to look back objectively at like, man, we did some awesome stuff together. We had some important wins. I mean, just really cool things that I know the team can look back on fondly. So yeah, those would be some for sure.
Hmm. Um, okay, now I was I forgot that you guys had gone to Boston as sort of like I don't want to say a weekend trip, but it was
Yeah.
effectively a weekend trip. I mean, was there a reason to go up there? I mean, was it just to sort of try to play some other teams that you might not necessarily see, or is there a big alumni base up in the Boston area?
Yeah, all the above. Like I said, so this was the 70th year of the
Mm-hmm.
program, and we do have a number of student athletes that are from all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a few that are in the Northeast, a ton of alums that are from the Northeast, and we were able to play Springfield College and Brandeis University
Yeah.
on a Friday, Sunday, and so we were able to do different events at both games, as
Mm-hmm.
well as on Saturday, there was a family that hosted uh, alums, families, friends of the program at a dinner that night where we could kind of off campus honor the program. We also did an
Oh,
on campus
nice.
celebration.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really an awesome weekend all the way through. But yeah, there was an opportunity to kind of get out and get the team in front of alums and parents and everybody else, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. That sounds like a neat trip all around, just because of everything around it, right? It's not just hopping in a bus to go play two
Yeah.
games, right? Like,
And we took the team to Faneuil Hall down in Boston and the historic area of the city and let
yeah,
them walk
yeah,
around and do some stuff. And hopefully, I mean, we're fortunate that we can hopefully kind of do something out of region maybe once every 2 years, which would be kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
nice. If you're doing that
yeah,
twice in a player's 4 years, it's just another thing that hopefully makes their experience pretty impactful.
yeah. That's like, hey, if you can get it, what, an international trip in somebody's 4-year term, and then two of the regionals, right? That's actually a really good game plan.
Right.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting, especially if you go, like you said, where you have support. You got folks who could support you there. All right, the and I don't want to focus too heavily on it, but you mentioned earlier about sort of like in those biggest moments that
Yeah.
you sort of fell short. I mean, obviously you're playing Ohio Wesleyan in the semis. Maybe if you could expand on it, do you think it was a case of just not being, not from a practice, but just not ready for the big moment, or
Um, yeah, I would say so. To step back, I mean, at a macro level, right? Like our season came down to 5 games. Twice against Ohio Wesleyan, once against Kenyon in the regular season, and then two out of league regional matches against Otterbein and John
John
Carroll.
Carroll? Yeah,
And so at a macro level, you step back and you say, oh, well, we didn't score a goal. We didn't win one of those games, and even if we go 2-2-1 or 2-1-2 or
yeah,
3-1-1,
yep,
we don't have to be perfect, but if we even kind of split the difference in a lot of those games, we're playing in a conference
yeah,
final.
yeah.
We're playing in an NCAA tournament because our
Tournament,
numbers
yeah,
would have been fine. Um, so at a macro level, it's easy to step back and say, yeah, like we weren't good enough in those moments, um, and we weren't. And then I think the work now, honestly, is like diving into what specifically was happening in those games, and are there themes across each of
hmm,
those 5 games that we can kind of look at and work on, and that's honestly a lot of the work that's going to happen moving forward, not just with our staff, but we're going to empower our players to do that.
hmm,
But I wouldn't even say, to answer your question, um, that we weren't ready for the moment. I think the group was certainly prepared, motivated, excited. Um, we need to be, I think, a little bit more competent in certain areas of our play,
hmm,
and then when you're more competent, then you're
yeah,
more confident.
yeah,
And
yeah,
if you're
yeah,
fitter, if you're more technical, if you're
yeah,
sharper with your tactics. I mean, so I would say that is the biggest part of it. I mean, I just know when our guys walked off the field in those games, the performances were certainly there was parts of the performances that we can look at and say, you know what, like we're really not far, and we're actually
hmm,
closer in many moments than we were 12 months ago. And I really do
yeah,
believe that. But
yeah,
now we have to be better than we were this past fall in 12 months to hopefully
yeah,
get results.
yeah, yeah. And it, look, I was, and we'll talk a little bit about when we talk about the season, right? I hate to say it, like you were in a tough spot even before the season, right? Because you had such this remarkable season last year where you win the NCAC, and the expectation is high, and to try to replicate that again. And I think last year you had a lot of things sort of going for you. You had this momentum, and you had all the, and to replicate that, I just think becomes really, really
Yeah, and
difficult.
yeah, you're not wrong, and certainly as we said to the guys, like we had expectations now, and those are
Mm-hmm.
things that we earned, which is
Yeah.
awesome, and it's a point of pride. Um, but like in 2 years, we haven't lost to another team in our league but that isn't named Ohio Wesleyan and Kenyon. And so we've done some really great things, but we
Yeah.
also recognize like those two programs are really good programs, and so
Yeah,
are the
yeah.
John Carrolls and the Otterbeins and
Yeah.
the and others in our region that are all good. And now we just have to keep getting better to hopefully, um, you know, make a difference in each of those games, which I think we can. We certainly can. Um, but for our guys, especially like right up the spine, we were playing, you know, a sophomore goalkeeper that hadn't played a minute of
Yeah.
college soccer this
Mhm.
year. You know, we were playing a freshman center back that played every minute of every game, and
Mhm.
sophomores that were playing bigger roles right up the spine and in other areas that, like, you know, these guys had to be in the arena this year
Yeah.
to really fully understand like what it takes at this level, and
Yeah.
thankfully they were. And what we didn't have this year, which many of our peers had, and what we had last year, was just like some fifth year guys
Guys, yeah.
that
Yeah.
or transfers or whatever, which
Mhm.
Denison's just not set up for that
Yeah.
necessarily. Um, so like that seems to be a pretty common denominator for a lot of
Mhm.
teams right now. That is just a kind of a function of COVID, which will cycle out. But we didn't have that, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
we were in the arena.
Yeah. I was surprised. I didn't think of it that much, but that's very true. Having a 50-year guy or multiples on a team matters immensely.
Mhm.
Immensely. Like look at Stevens, right? Like this is a perfect example. They got a couple 5-year, 50-year guys.
Right.
On the women's side, you look at Johns Hopkins. They have 8, 9. you know, like
Right.
it matters. So, I mean, what was there? Was there anything that surprised you of this of your team?
I was pleasantly surprised with the quality of our goalkeeping. Dylan
Mm-hmm.
Brown the year
Mm-hmm.
prior was as good as anybody in the country,
Yeah, yeah. He was one of my
and
favorites. One of my top 3. Yeah.
yeah, he was fantastic. And I was really proud of the fact that Tommy Prokos got the lion's share of the minutes and
Mm-hmm.
was a really good goalkeeper. But we also had a sophomore as well, Zach Barr, that in his own way like had an incredible year. And
Mm-hmm.
Tommy doesn't have the year he does if the guy behind him doesn't do it.
Yeah.
And for them to step into those roles, they did a great job. I think we conceded 9 goals in 3 games where the games just kind of like got away from us, which means that in the 15 other games we conceded 9 goals. And so
Mm-hmm.
we really actually defended at a pretty high level.
Yeah.
And in 11 of our games where we scored goals, we scored 35, which was a 3 goal a game average.
Average. Yeah.
And so like I think we showed when we played our game and we found um, the way we wanted to play, like we can score and we can defend at a pretty high level.
Yeah.
And so now it's just like, can we replicate us at our best for longer
Yeah.
stretches of time and
Yeah.
in bigger moments?
Yeah. That's the one thing I noticed this year in that there was a lot more distance this year between you and a lot of your opponents goal wise. Like you could go out and get 3 goals and not be like, wow, we scored 3 goals, almost like surprise, right? Like you were getting the production that um, when you needed it, right? When you wanted it. I
Yeah,
think that
we
was
yeah we definitely got to be a little better in certainly in critical moments. Like games are going to be a little bit tighter.
mm-hmm.
We weren't as dangerous as we could have been on restarts. You know, that's an area where you can even in a college soccer season when it's really
We could,
compact,
yeah,
like you can kind of generate something.
yeah,
You know, so that comes with some competitive experience, which I think we
mm-hmm.
gained this year, and hopefully next
Yeah,
year some of these guys just take on bigger roles and are ready.
yeah, yeah. All right, so let's talk about some of these rule changes,
Yeah.
and I'll stipulate you're my rule guy, which whether you realize it or not, or whether it's what you want to be known as in my mind. I'm sorry, but yeah, you're my rule guy. So let's start with the OT. The OTs. You had 3 ties, right?
Right.
which is not a lot in comparison to others. Like, what? I mean, do you think the no overtimes during the regular season, was it, in your mind, is it a net positive? Has it been a net negative? Would you go back to OT? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm
So I'll answer it in two ways. So I wear two hats, right? Like there's Brandon Bianco, the soccer
yep.
coach hat, and then there's myself as the Division III chair, or the Division III representative on the NCAA soccer rules committee. Which, for those that care about this stuff, the rules committee is comprised of all three divisions, both genders, and Division III, despite being the
Hmm.
biggest division by number, only has two representatives, myself and then a women's representative.
Hmm.
Division I and II get two voting members from each gender.
Hmm.
So before anything even happens, we're already outvoted as Division III
Yeah.
members.
Yeah.
But just for some general context, like they do a rules survey almost every year. They send it out to our rules, or they send it out to our membership um, for feedback just a few weeks ago. But when we last were surveying coaches, I have it in front of me. So the 73% of division, or 73% of men's NCAA coaches were in favor of eliminating overtime in the regular season.
Hmm.
69% of the women's coaches were in favor. Conference commissioners were over 74%. 95% of officials were in
Hmm.
favor of eliminating overtime. And I think
Hmm.
some of the discussions that were happening well before I joined the committee were around, compressed seasons,
Yeah. Yeah.
player
Yeah.
load, safety, et
Yeah.
cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I share that to say, as the voting member and the other voting members on these committees, if the membership of the NCAA, which is all of our schools, is saying at a pretty overwhelming margin, we need to get rid of this. If we're not following what the membership wants, then we might as well just get away, do away with these committees and have some czar of college soccer make
So,
decisions
yeah.
from on high.
I'll
Um,
be that czar if you need somebody.
yeah.
Like,
Having said that, I would say, just informally talking to peers and things, I think there's many coaches that are just a little bummed that OT's not around.
yeah,
Nobody likes ties, especially in Division III, where, I mean, in
it
Division
matters a
One,
lot. Yeah,
if you're like 10, 4, and 6, like records like that has become normalized behavior,
yeah,
where that's kind of foreign
yeah,
for Division III
yeah,
coaches.
yeah.
So, I get both sides of it. Personally, I would say we either have to have overtime, or if we're not going to have overtime, then there needs to be um, changes to substitution and/or clock management, because games that I was a part of this year, it just seemed like without overtime, I mean, and substituting and re-entry and all these things, I mean, games were 55, 60 minutes. And so then you're walking away at the end of it like, man, this just seems
Yeah.
off. Well,
Yeah, yeah. That's a yeah. That's a good point. Like and it's funny, all the coaches that I've spoken to so far, and I always try to ask them about the OT thing. I do think that there is a. I'll just say, and I don't mean this in a bad way, right? Like there is an emotional connection to having OT. There isn't necessarily an intellectual argument for or
yeah. Yeah, I
against
mean,
it.
like
I think the
we
intellectual
played,
side is, hey, players and physical load, all that kind of stuff that occurs during a season. I think they justifiably understand that, and it's been an issue for years. But I think the ones that think, oh, overtime, I think there's like this emotional part and charge to overtime, which is legit too, right? Like it's
yeah.
some of the most exciting games go to OT. But
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody would objectively say, like, when you win a game and with that's golden goal and it's a conference semifinal or
yeah,
whatever it is, like those moments really jump out to people.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I see both sides of it. I think on a committee like I'm on, my role is to represent the membership, and
mm-hmm,
whether it was overtime or whether it was
Yeah.
removal of golden goal, whether it was reentry. I mean, we try to follow uh, the desire of the membership,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think you were. I mean, I don't think I have to say this, but I never thought you were the czar of rules. I just thought you were the rule guy. You know,
yeah,
like, but it is. That's interesting. I didn't know that the number was that large, right? Like 75% of any group that says, well, they want to do something one way. That's pretty significant, right? Statistically, that is a
yeah,
significant number of votes, right? That you can't
yeah,
you have to
and
acknowledge somehow or another, because if you're not doing your job, right?
right, and the unfortunate part, and this is good and bad. Like if Division 1 men, especially, had their way, um, they would have the game resemble the professional game as much as humanly possible.
Yeah.
And they are frustrated because um, they're at the mercy of the voting members of Division 3 and
Three.
Division 2 that
Yeah.
don't want those things.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, if Division 3 men's and women's coaches say 90% of us want overtime back, well,
Yeah.
we're already outvoted by Division 1 and
One.
2, which
Yeah.
Division 1 men and women
Yeah.
are will never go back to
No.
wanting overtime in the regular season. I mean, at least in the short term, I don't see that ever happening.
Really?
So it's a push and pull. Like when I
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
to our Division 1 colleagues, you ask them like, what's the feedback with overtime? They're like, oh, it's fine. We're good with not having it, and
Yeah.
it's very different.
Yeah.
But there
Can
can't be different rules for the different divisions.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
could be different rules by gender, like you've seen in men's
Yeah.
and women's basketball.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's a door we don't really want to open unless we absolutely feel like there's a need,
Mm.
and there hasn't been as strong of a need just yet. But maybe that
Yeah.
comes. Who knows?
Can I ask you, like, what is it about, at least in the context of the OT rules, what is it about the OT that the Division 1 coaches are so opposed to it? Is it to that notion that ties have sort of been normalized within the season, or?
I would say all the sports safety stuff, player
Mm-hmm.
load. I mean, and their seasons are longer than ours. But I
Mm-hmm.
look at our season this year. Like we played 17 games in 58 days.
Yeah.
And I remember walking off the field at Brandeis, and we played a Friday Sunday opening weekend. It wasn't even a
And you're
back to back,
yeah.
but it's 95 degrees on their turf.
And
And had
your
we
legs are
played an
shot.
extra
Yeah.
20 minutes,
Yeah.
I don't know if our guys could have done it. And our
Yeah.
guys came in a really good base of fitness. So it's not really a fitness thing. I just think the Division 1 coaches are like, ties are a part of soccer. This is how it is.
Yeah.
And, um, I just think they look at like the accumulated fatigue that happens if you're playing all
Yeah.
those
Yeah. Yeah.
overtime games. So I
Yeah.
would say that would be what they would point to.
Yeah. No, I get that part, right? Like I don't, that doesn't surprise me. And like you said, no OT or not, 2 games in a row, a Friday Sunday schedule. By Sunday, you can barely bend your knees if you've played
Right.
those
Yeah.
full 90 on
The
both,
unfortunate part, though, Steve, is like the knock-on effect, right? So like they don't want it, which is okay. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But Division 3 has to live with it, but yet Division 3 still has back-to-back
Yeah,
games in the
games.
NCAA tournament. And so
Yeah.
like, my good friend Travis Wall at St. Olaf, they had a great season and they lost in the Sweet 16
Yeah.
and penalties, but I'm watching his game and I'm looking at it, and it's 4:30 local time when his game gets over, and had they gotten through, Gustavus obviously did, but the winner of that game, because they went to overtime, 2 10-minute periods, and then penalty
Yeah.
kicks, had to turn around and play 18 and a
Then
half hours later.
later, yeah, not
And
even a full day. I saw that too. I was like,
crazy.
wow,
It's
that's
crazy.
nuts.
So,
That's nuts.
like we get anyhow, Division
Yeah.
3, there's the knock-on effects of decisions that get made
Yeah.
by others. So,
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so let's move on to the other topic that we went back and forth with, and you were so kind to provide me with information on it. Um, where I'd been saying again, not knowing anything, just sort of off the top of my head, I was like, hey, you know what? Instead of it was sort of like a counter argument to, okay, bring back the OT, but if you really want to make a difference for players, extend the season out by a week. And then you came back and you said, hey, do you know that we're looking at how do you extend the season by, I think on average it was like 10 or 12 days. And, and
Yeah,
and so maybe you could talk a little bit about that and
yeah, sure. I'm just pulling it up so so I can look at it.
hmm
Yeah, so essentially, well, for context, like there's all these different working groups, and the United Soccer Coaches has a Division
hmm
Three one, and we were kind of chatting through things, and with the new NCAA legislation that's been going on, with new constitutions and all these
hmm
things, I think the NCAA has very quickly tried to, can we make meaningful change in certain areas? And it's brought up discussions. And anyways, soccer was a part of it.
hmm
And, I know there's going to be something that's going to go to the vote from the Division Three membership to extend preseason for field hockey, men's and women's soccer, volleyball, etc., to add a few
hmm
more days to preseason. And
hmm
and anyhow, and I think it brought up a broader discussion about, can we take a step back and maybe rethink what the fall could look like that would benefit college soccer. And one of the things that our group and I kind of spearheaded some of the discussion was around a fall season model that basically does kind of three things. Um, the first one is we have the same preseason date that football has. I mean, there's a
hmm
count back that the NCAA uses why one sport is given priority on more preparation days than others in terms of like equity and all these things
yeah, yeah.
that are important to us. Like why some student athletes are deemed, oh yeah, we can spend the money on those athletes to come in early, but not others. So I think if we just said, okay, everybody in the fall comes in using the same count back football has, that would be point one. The second part of it is I'm going to read from it because I always get tripped up by this one, but allow for countable matches in the fall traditional season to begin on the Saturday prior to September 1st. And then if September 1st falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, the first date of competition would be August 28th. So essentially, what this guarantees is a 10th weekend of competition, which we
hmm
get that like every fourth or fifth or sixth year. And it's so crazy because it really, when you have that extra weekend, it gives you just so much more
So much
flexibility.
latitude. Yeah, yeah. Anyhow,
So instead of getting that every fifth year, you get it every fall. And
yeah.
then the third one, which would be, this would have to be done by the championship committee,
hmm
but essentially we would play our NCAA tournament over three straight weekends. We'd bump everything back a week. So the
Yeah,
NCAA Final Four would still be essentially this weekend.
yeah,
They'd play the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight weekend over Thanksgiving, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
the first and second round the previous week, which I could understand some of the pushback because I've heard it. I've been in the room when you propose it. The administrators say, well, we don't want to host NCAA tournaments over Thanksgiving. It's really hard on travel, blah, 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 blah. But
hmm
I would always reply, well, Division three football seems to play their NCAA tournament over those weekends, and NCAA basketball tournaments are happening over Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So it can be done. And I think if you do that, you're benefiting all 800 plus men's and women's Division three
In
programs
one
by
fell
extending the
swoop.
season back
Yeah.
a week. And so the knock-on effect is, like if this proposal was in place this year, instead of playing 60 days of competition for your 17 or 18 games, we'd have 72 days. So
Yeah.
essentially almost two full weeks, which
Weeks.
which means less class time missed because you're playing more games on the weekend than
Yeah.
midweek, etc. And, instead of playing like us, we had 17 games in 58 days. Now you're playing 17, 18 games with more days of rest.
Yeah.
And I think it has to be conditional on saying to our coaches, like, hey, I think we need to put a hard cap on, maybe it's, 18
Yeah.
countable
Yeah.
games, as
Yeah.
opposed to, instead of coaches maxing out saying, okay, now instead of playing 17, 18 games, I'm going to play
Now
all
I can do
20.
20. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No.
And you defeat the purpose, right? Like
Right.
if player load is the not the main reason, but it's one of the many reasons, then you can't say, "Hey, yeah, player load," and then be like, "Well, I'm going to load the players up now that I have the extra
Yeah.
days," right? And
Yeah, I looked at it, Steve. I think when I looked once, I'm going to get my numbers wrong. I wish I had it in front of me, but I looked at it, and I like this year, I think we played, I don't know, whatever it was, 12, 13 of our 17 games on 3 days of fewer rest.
mhm.
And Division One, which has essentially this same kind of
Already, they already,
calendar.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, teams that I looked at, like Jay Vidovich at Pitt is a buddy of mine that I follow
yeah,
his
yeah,
program pretty closely. I think they had maybe 3 games where they had games on 3 days of fewer rest.
yeah,
Again, I'm probably getting some of these numbers wrong, but very few games. Whereas
yeah,
opposed to us, where almost every game is on 3 days of fewer rest. Where
yeah, yeah.
anyway, so I think it's a way to enhance recovery, fewer midweek games, which means less class time missed. I mean, all
Yeah.
positive things,
Yeah, yeah. I
and it's
oh,
doable
good.
within the bandwidth of Division Three, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, that was the interesting thing I thought about when I looked at the the sort of the outline of the proposal, whatever the document is called, the proposal, or this is the rough idea of it. I looked at that not in the context of, again, all the reasons why you would want to do it. I just looked at it, is this feasible? And
Yeah,
and to me, I mean, what's the biggest concern in Division Three? Like when everything push comes to shove, in my book, the way I look at it is schools are going to say, "Can we afford to do this or not?"
right.
And any proposal that you do has to fall into the affordability piece. And
Mhm.
and I look at that, and realistically, if there is going to be a additional cost, it's just for that time up front, right? Because you got to house and you got to feed for
Right.
an extra week, and you do some rudimentary math. Yeah, I'm sorry if you can't get another extra couple grand for a program for that purpose, then you know something's not right in my book.
Yeah, as you know, like playing over 2 semesters isn't going to happen in Division
No,
Three.
no, exactly. That's
It's going to be
exactly it.
really
Like
hard.
your cost structure goes through the roof if you do that, right? Like
Yeah.
it would go through the roof. But
But could we make meaningful change by bumping forward a little bit or bumping back a
hmm
little bit? Yeah, I think that would actually help. And I would understand. I think there is an argument. Well, if you're playing later in November, weather could be affected. But
yeah,
I'm here in the Midwest. The weekend that Kenyon just hosted here, 15 minutes
yeah,
away, they had a really tough weekend with weather. It was cold. I mean, they could get games in, and it was fine,
yeah.
but it was cold and nasty. But then last weekend, if we were playing over Thanksgiving, it was 55 and
Drive
sunny.
and
So you,
sunny.
you just
Yeah,
never know. You never
yeah, yeah.
know. So I
Look,
think it can be done.
and I always say the thing about the weather is, like it or not, weather is part of our game, and
Right.
right? Everyone's got a turf field somewhere nowadays, and if it's that bad, you go on the turf. You just do what you need to do, right? Like,
Yeah.
and again, I mean, the cool thing about, again, I have this crazy notion on the games, like, it's cool to see a team like last year, Johns Hopkins, go to John Carroll and play in the middle of a blizzard or close to a blizzard, and see how John Carroll was like, man, we're in our element, and Johns Hopkins be like, what's this white stuff, like, and so I think there's a little bit of that, like, you fight really hard to host. Why? Because we're home. It's we're used to what we have here, all those things, including the weather. So,
Right.
and until we all get domes, which is not going to happen as far as at least in my lifetime, like then it's almost like a silly argument in my book. All right, so. All right, so thank you for that. By the way, that was
Sure.
excellent. That was real interesting. Does it go for a vote? I mean, what's the next sort of
Yeah, this isn't
step?
a formal proposal. I mean, I think ultimately what we have to do as a soccer coaching community and our coaches
Mm-hmm.
association is get really organized, which I think we're working on that. Trish Hughes, who coordinates college programming
Mm-hmm.
for United Soccer Coaches, I think is working on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I hope to do, if nothing else, is continue a conversation that maybe some of our coaches can kind of rally around. And I've shared
Mm-hmm.
this informally with some coaches, and there seems to be, um, you know, positive thoughts on it. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, it's going to come down to getting administrators on board, getting college presidents on board, getting our coaches association to get behind it. You know, one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that, uh, for comparison, like college football coaches, I don't know what their coaches association is named, but they, for whatever reason, like they are really really well organized,
Mm-hmm.
and every single time there's a proposal up, like it almost passes. It seems like every
Mm-hmm.
time because they do a good job of making sure their
Membership
coaches and
is
admins
no, and yeah,
know.
everybody
So
knows.
it's an
Yeah,
opportunity for us to do a better job.
yeah. Okay, all right. Well, like I said, I like it. I just think there's no reason not to, and keep the no overtimes, right? Like, man, make it even better for the athletes, the student athletes. But all right, so let's let's switch to the season. You already mentioned, you were 10-5-3. You lost twice to your alma mater. I don't know if this is right, and it could be. I didn't watch all of your games, and but it seemed like it did seem like there was a. I don't want to say it was like seemed hard for you guys to get started. Like you would have this up moment, and you're thinking, okay, this is where the momentum begins, right? Because I'm a big believer in that. Like winning begets winning, and you're thinking, okay, next, and then you would tie, or you'd have
Yeah.
one of the losses. Like is was did am I does that sound right? Am I on to something there? Do you
Yeah, I mean
think or?
yeah, you look at the year, we didn't go on the string of games where we're ripping off,
Yeah.
5 wins, 6 wins in a row. Um, and that's kind of the nature of seasons for most teams.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly I think like the maturation that we hope to make and have in the program is, you're turning some of those ties into wins, and then maybe some of those losses into a result. Maybe not
Mm-hmm.
always a win, but like maybe you're drawing instead of losing, and then
Mm-hmm.
that changes your season pretty quick. But I think for us, we're looking at it as like, can we set up the team in maybe a different way that helps us be at our best more consistently? Like, yeah, I mean, we're looking at that really closely as a staff. But also, I think part of it is just the natural maturation that happens with teams and with
Mm-hmm.
players. And as I said, I mean, 2/3 of the group are
Yeah,
freshmen or
yeah.
sophomores. So
That could
there
very
can be
well
some,
explain it, right? Like young
yeah.
youth, young guys on the team.
Yeah,
It's they don't
but I
have
think it
that
also passes
consistency
the
yet.
buck a little bit
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to just say, oh, it's only on the guys and they got to get older, and if they get
yeah,
older, they'll be better. I mean, we also have to give them better ideas as coaches
yeah,
and as
yeah,
staff, and I think that those are all things we're kind of looking at. We have some ideas, so it'll be
yeah.
a fun time this
But
spring and into the fall to toy around with them.
can I ask the question your boss would ask you? Like, where did you do you do you think you fell short anywhere as a coach or as a staff in this
Yeah.
season? And I don't mean that to be like, hey, I want to pick on you. I just, there's no one's a perfect, right? Like it just, and you try to deal with things as they come. But.
Yeah, I would say that the one big area that I've thought about a lot is I was never totally comfortable with our group extending pressure higher up the field.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and by extending it, it's like, you know, where did we where did we pick up? What were the rotations defensively? Um, yeah, we never totally solved that. If a team
Yeah.
plays with three in the back, like how do we step higher? If a team plays really narrow with their center backs and plays with a back four, like where do we press and how do we clog the middle? So that's something that as I think objectively on our year, like we need to answer those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, we have 10 months to kind of figure it out, and we have a body of
Yeah.
work that we can look at to do it.
Yeah.
But I'm comfortable enough saying like we need to give our guys better ideas in those
Yeah.
moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the nice thing is, I think if we couldn't extend pressure and we were leaking a ton of goals, then that'd be a problem. But I think we showed, in most moments of the year, we were really an organized team that was tough to break down.
Breakdown.
I would
Yeah.
like us to be organized and difficult to break through when teams are trying to play out, and that's something that I
Yeah.
think we can work on.
Yeah. No, you're defensively that's interesting. It's a good point though. It's not like you were bad in that regard, or you were leaking goals, as you said. I mean, you kept the number of clean shoots. You kept low amount of goals from going in, and I think that's a testament. Yeah, maybe not you're not stretching out your pressure up higher, but you're definitely doing something in your back line and your midfield to make sure that it becomes really difficult for teams to score on you.
Right.
Um, are there any of those games, any of the five that you thought you that got away from you that you that shouldn't have? Like in hindsight, do you
Um,
think? I mean, even though the last Ohio Wesleyan game, do you think that you shouldn't have been on that end of the scoreboard?
I mean, no, they took advantage of mistakes and moments, and so fair play to them. Like they were better on the night, and I would say the one that we would point to is probably the first Ohio Wesleyan game that we played
Mm-hmm.
at home, where I think it was actually one of our best 90 minutes. Um, and then they scored with 7 minutes to go on a great counter. Kid made a great play, but also, I'm an Ohio Wesleyan guy, so I also look at it as like, man, like that's how Ohio Wesleyan wins a lot of games because it's a
Games,
part of their
yeah,
championship DNA,
yeah, yeah,
which we need to build as our
yeah,
program. And so when you maybe aren't at your best, you're going on the road and you're stealing a result late because a team gives you an opening. And I
yeah,
hope that in 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, that we're
yeah,
doing
yeah,
that
yeah.
consistently. But that one definitely, I think our guys know that one got away from us. Um, John Carroll maybe wasn't our cleanest game, but that was a 1-0 game that maybe could have been a tie.
Mm-hmm.
Otterbein, they scored 3 goals in the span of like 2.5 or 3 minutes, which I don't think they probably ever did again all season, and we certainly didn't have that happen again all season. So it
Mm-hmm.
was one of those kind of weird things that, certainly they probably were the better team. Definitely they were on the night, but maybe if we're just a little bit cleaner in moments, like we stay out of 3 minutes of chaos. But
Yeah,
again, at a macro level, like when you step back and you realize, like in those 4 games or 5 games, I mean that was who we were this year, and we weren't
yeah,
good
yeah,
enough to win those games yet,
yeah,
and hopefully we will be in the future.
yeah,
So
yeah. Can I ask you an Ohio Wesleyan question, even just because you're an alum?
yeah,
I am fascinated that Jay was able to go from 0-4-2 all the way to the second round in the NCAA, win the NCAC, and I know teams, and there's probably in Division Three hundreds of teams that at 0-4-2 would have crumbled,
yeah.
right? Like just would have been like season's over, forget it, we're not getting anywhere. Just from your experience as being with Jay, like what do you think the talk was, and was there something to the turnaround or not? Was it that?
I don't think there's honestly any talk because every time you walk through the door and you see, the trophies on the wall and the pictures of
Mm-hmm.
previous teams, I mean, it's very clear what the standard is.
Mm-hmm.
And those guys knew walking in every day that they weren't up to the standard yet. And so, I mean, I credit their staff. I mean, they did a great job. I don't know if it was like they had to have, and I don't know this, I haven't asked, but I would doubt that they had to have like this big
Powwow, like
powwow come together speech. It was probably just
yeah.
more like, hey, let's double down on who we are as a program,
Mm-hmm.
which is a program that has really high standards, a great
Mm-hmm.
tradition, and let's just meet those. And if we
Yeah.
meet those, I mean, their personnel was good enough to do what
Yeah.
they did. I mean, but I would say if you look at their season, I mean, even in those early games, they were all pretty tight games. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
conceding a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They just had to make some Ohio Wesleyan winning plays, which
Yeah.
they did towards the middle and certainly the end of the year.
Yeah.
But I think it's a testament certainly to their staff. They did a great job.
Yeah.
They were my vote for uh, coaching staff of the year for a reason. I mean, they really did
Yeah.
a great job, and I think um, that's what a year like this kind of makes the program what it is because
Yeah. Oh,
even
this is
when
legendary stuff in
yeah,
my book, right? Like,
yep,
I mean, the only way to make it better is if they go further into into the tournament,
right,
because
and I
I
think
just
they
think
could
it's a
have.
remarkable
They could have.
turnaround, right?
Yeah, and they had a good, an older group that was pretty
Yeah.
good. So kudos to them. I also
Yeah.
hope when we see them again, we beat them 3-0. So that's
Yeah,
always
yeah.
good.
I'm just stoking it a little bit in a subtle sort of
Yeah,
way. All right, so let's go back to Dennis. And sorry about that to get
no,
distracted
you're
on
good.
another team, but I do want to reach out to Jay and have a conversation with him because I think it's awesome to see because I think that's an example for other programs. Like, man, you can't,
Sure.
you just can't quit on it. And yeah, if you have this tradition, you double down on it. But all right, you got another great season out of one of my best 11 players from last year, Ethan Miracle. He's a senior, and I'm assuming he's graduating. Like, how big of a factor was he for your success this year? How much of a how much of a leader is he for your group? And if he is graduating, like, what are your thoughts on how do you get somebody of his talent back into that spot?
Oh man,
All
yeah, he
million
is
dollar
graduating.
questions, man.
It is funny in 2022. You do have to ask if the kid
Yeah,
is
yeah,
gonna graduate. He
yeah.
is. I'm going to be really excited for him. To get his degree and to get off into the real world. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's really a wonderful kid, and it's going to be, whoever hires him and whatever he chooses to
Mm-hmm.
do, he's going to be a great addition to somebody's organization because he's just a winner.
Mm-hmm.
Ethan played as a forward all of his time in college. He grew up playing as a forward, and then towards the end of last year we knew because he was so tactically savvy and he had a great work rate and defensively he did such a great job that we had to put him on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And as that was happening, we were also um, seeing somebody in our freshman, now sophomore class, Jake Kruger, kind of blossom into the player that he's starting to
Mm-hmm.
become. And he was a first team all league guy this year with Ethan. And so Ethan's move was the best for the team tactically, but it was also from a personnel standpoint allowed us to create a role for somebody that ended up having a great year as well. But Ethan had to play in a different role this year, all year, kind of out wide as a winger, wide midfielder, whatever you
Midfield,
want
yeah.
to think of him. But he was definitely farther away from the goal than he would have liked.
Mm-hmm.
But he never complained. And when we needed him the most, he stepped up every single
Mm-hmm.
time. And it was funny in our last game, he smacked one off the inside of the post at Ohio Wesleyan. That would have made it 1-1. And if it goes 1-1, it's a different game. It was probably the only
Yeah,
time all year where Ethan didn't have one kind of bounce his way.
yeah,
But nonetheless, I think he just had a great season and he had a great career, and it's just a testament to him as a kid. I mean, he's just a
yeah,
great kid, good
yeah.
leader. and just an awesome teammate.
Mm-hmm. And there's no way to get him to stay.
Yeah, I would love to. You know, each guy's path is a little bit different.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
don't have grad programs
Oh,
here, so
that's
again,
right.
it doesn't
Yeah,
make it. It doesn't always make it as easy. And we're
yeah.
100% residential, so housing for seniors gets a little
Seniors.
bit
Yeah,
tricky. And
yeah,
anyway, so we certainly would love to have him back as well as our other seniors, but I also know,
yeah,
this is part of the natural maturation of teams and of programs. You lose
yeah,
influential guys and they leave, and then other guys have to step up. So it's also a good opportunity for
yeah.
us.
I, I, I thought he was absolutely outstanding in the NCAC final last year against
Mhm.
Kenyon and what he
Well,
did. And I think he shut down single-handedly their right their right side. Anything coming down the right back the right side or your left was I think he single-handedly played it perfectly to basically shut it down. So they didn't have anything going that way. Um,
yeah,
I
yeah,
still
he
remember that.
did. He
Just a
did. And he did
remarkable
it all
game.
year
Yeah, yeah.
this year.
This year,
So
yeah,
he did a
yeah,
great job.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So you have you have 9 seniors. You mentioned you have you have whatever the freshman sophomore majority of freshman sophomore. Um, like how's your recruiting class looking to I don't want to say replace, it's such a bad word, but to sort of fill those shoes.
Yeah, it's
Um,
good. We're for the most part done with our 2023 class. There's a few guys that we're hoping to finish up with, but we have 7 or 8 guys coming now. So it's a good group. We're fortunate that I think like Denison, we're able to attract
yeah,
good kids, good players, and
it's
that kind of thing, which is encouraging. But I also know like if we're going to be good, it's going to fall on the shoulders of our guys coming back and
back.
them
Yeah.
setting a really good standard for the new guys to come into. But
Mm-hmm.
our roster is a little bit unique in the sense that when I was hired, it was in April as of 2020 as the year as COVID was
Mm-hmm.
shutting everything down and that class, which is now our junior to be senior class, I mean, we really couldn't do anything with, and that was
Mm-hmm.
done. And there's 2 of those guys in that class, so we're only going to have 2 seniors next year.
Mm-hmm.
Both 2 guys are awesome kids, really
Mm-hmm.
good players. So the quality of the people in that class is as good of a class as we have, but in terms of numbers, it's really small. So each of the last couple classes has almost been almost like a class and a half
Yeah.
to fill some of that in. But this class now is going to be, I would say as close to normal as
Mm-hmm.
possible. 7, 8, 9 guys, and it's a good group, and we're excited for them to come, and hopefully, if we do a good job onboarding them, I think they can kind of hit the ground running in August when they show up, and that's what we're
Yeah.
really focusing on.
Yeah. How important is it for you to find guys who keep the competitive tempo day in and day out for your squad?
Yeah, I would say it's important for everybody. I would say that what I share with families is, when they ask about like do freshmen play or blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah. My simple answer is if freshmen aren't coming in on day one and competing for playing time right away, then we're not recruiting the right guys. Now,
Yeah.
whether or not that happens,
Yeah.
there's adjustments with
Circumstances. Yeah.
with classes and being away
Mm-hmm.
from home, but at the end of the day, like those guys need to be able to come in and be at a really good level. And if they're
Yeah.
not, then I think we're not recruiting the right guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um, all right. So I'm actually leaving tomorrow for my simple player number 2 is playing down in Greer, South Carolina for some
Mhm.
ECNL thing. And so we're making a pit stop in Salem, Virginia to watch the semis that are happening tomorrow. So, what are your thoughts on the Final Four? Now you get to be a pundit, right? See?
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. Yeah. Well, I'll say, personally, I'm pulling um, for my guy Dale at Stevens. He's a good buddy.
Uh-huh.
So I'm really happy for them. I'm happy for all the teams that made it. I would say if you're a pundit, you're probably thinking that if this was going to be the year that a University of Chicago breaks through,
Yeah.
it would be a year like this. But obviously Stevens is a really good opponent, and two teams. When you get this far, like everybody's in their own way, like humming a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
But I really like. I mean, I've been able to watch a ton of games over the last couple weeks, but I really like honestly what a lot of the teams have done. I think Chicago over the course of the year and last year certainly as well, like they've shown that they're as complete of a Division III team
Yeah.
as they're going to have.
Yeah.
Stevens has kind of the competitive moxie of getting through
Yep.
some tight games. Mary Wash has probably been through as good of a gauntlet as anybody.
Yeah.
In addition to Williams, I mean Williams obviously going through Messiah and then Kenyon and then that they've obviously been through it too. So it'll be interesting. I'm going to be excited to see the games. I'm really happy that there's a day of rest in between. But
I'm liking that too, by the way. Not for nothing. Yeah.
It'll be good. And Salem's a really good venue, so I'm happy for them.
I mean, the pictures alone make that place just look awesome. I was down there for Division III National Football Championship in '93, I think it was, when Mount Union won its first. It's a beautiful area, but their Roanoke Stadium is just, I mean, that's a stunner, right?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you something else, but that's okay. All right, so I got to ask you, like, predictions abound. Remember, if you don't accurately predict winner and score, I expect that $100 check in the mail to me.
Oh man. So I'll go 1-0 Chicago in the semifinal. And I will go 2-0 Chicago in a final over Mary Washington.
Wow. Okay. All right.
So put it down.
Okay. Yeah. It's recorded. It's for time immemorial now. By the way, Dale is a great guy.
The best.
Simple player
Sorry,
number. Dale. Yeah. The simple player number 2, that's on his short list to play at Stevens. So, and he's a great guy. Nothing but kindness and really responsive, really good guy. And loves to talk the game. Like really sharp mind on the game. So, all right, Coach, I've taken way too much time of yours. This went longer than I thought it would, but I do appreciate it. Really do love your insight, love your knowledge of the rules. And thanks again. And hopefully we can catch up next time we want to do, and by all means, if there's anything else you want to share and get out there, I try my best. So happy to have you on board again.
Yeah, well, thanks for all you do. I know it's been every year Division III soccer keeps getting a bigger audience, so you're a part of that, which we certainly appreciate.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Coach. Thanks again.
Thank you.
If you like this show, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can also find me on anti-social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks. This is a message from my Chief Marketing Officer. I think this keeps him happy.